Chris was a fierce warrior, but he could turn that off. He was a gentle giant.
Chris, Kyle, and I were at SEAL Team 3 together. He was just a regular, good old boy and would give you the shirt off his back. Just a normal guy that did an extremely important job and did it well.
He had his platoon mates that stood beside him, and I know what they thought of him. Highly respected, looked up to him, big brother. But I knew him as being just a good man. He loved his wife, he loved his family, he loved his country. He had a soft side to him. He didn't let a lot of people see it.
Not only did he save all of us and the Army guys and the Marines and Fallujah, and you know, when he came back, he just kept on helping. And he didn't do that out of some kind of sense of moral purpose or anything like that. He just did it because that's who he was.
You know, Chris wasn't perfect. He was no saint, but he struggled well. And I've just measured men not by the outcome, but by the struggle.
Chris was an amazing husband, and we definitely had our hard times. And I think that maybe one of the things that makes a husband great is somebody who keeps trying and doesn't give up.
When you look at Chris and you talk about Chris, the words of humility and honor are always intertwined with what Chris Kyle was.
And I think all those qualities of being a great father, a great husband, a great SEAL, they all just were interwoven in the fabric of Chris Kyle.
Though the world knew him as the deadliest sniper in U.S. military history, Chris Kyle was more than that. To understand the man who became known as the legend, there's only one place to start.
I don't think you can know who Chris Kyle was without knowing that he was a Texan.
Chris was the quintessential Texas boy. You know, he was strong, he was young, he was patriotic.
Anybody that knows who Chris was knows that not only was he for the Stars and Stripes, but he was also about that Lone Star from Texas. And he made sure that everybody knew about that. Every deployment, he had a Texas Longhorns cap that, you know, he would wear completely out.
He had a Texas flag that he had, carried through the wars with him. He made a big deal out of getting his kids to first touch Texas soil. Their feet, in both cases, the first thing their feet touched was Texas soil that he had his dad fly in for him.
Nurtured by that Texas soil himself, young Chris Kyle was more at home outdoors than cooped up in a classroom.
Chris and his family moved quite a bit when they were young, but one of the real constants was Texas. They also spent a lot of time outdoors. So Chris, as well as his brother Jeff, they were very, very close to nature, loved that open space.
We spent a lot of time out, out away from the cities. We raised cattle growing up, cattle and horses, so we were always out in the wilderness, going around causing trouble in the neighborhood, just being typical Texas boys.
The moral compass that would guide Chris all his life was set during his Texas childhood.
He had this idealistic way of looking at the world that came from a really wholesome upbringing. His parents were happily married, and they lived a good, clean life and brought their kids to church and kept things simple in a small community. There was also a definition of kind of black and white, right and wrong.
He had a really, really well-developed sense of fairness. If he saw an unfair situation, no matter on what level it was, he wanted to correct it.
Like a lot of Texas boys, Chris learned how to handle a gun at an early age.
When Chris was younger, he was a pretty good shot. He's always had a natural ability at shooting, but classifying Chris as a natural-born marksman, I don't know that I'd say that, and I don't know that he would ever say that as well. I'll have to brag that, I could definitely outshoot him as a kid.
He was literally a sniper from the time he was a child. They lived in the country, and he would climb on the roof with a BB gun and then invite friends over, and, they'd have their BB wars.
As a teenager, Chris's aspirations reflected the simple Texas boy he was.
Chris had two dreams. He wanted to be a cowboy and he wanted to be in the military.
There's a photograph of Chris taken when he was maybe 3 or 4, and he's in cowboy regalia. You can just tell from that one photo that this kid is very, very into cowboys and very into the West. So it's kind of natural, I think, that when he got to high school, around high school age, he started doing rodeo.
Chris was pretty natural in the rodeos, and I think that came from how we were raised. The horses that we had, we broke ourselves, so he just fell right in there when it came to riding saddle bronc and bareback. And he made a name for himself pretty young, starting out.
And he became very good at it. He won a large number of belts. He probably could have graduated to really kind of to the higher echelons had he not had a really bad accident.
Chris got injured on a bareback horse. He was bucked off a bareback horse, shattered his wrist in several places.
The horse fell over on top of Chris and crushed him, and he was actually life-flighted out.
That accident right there pretty much ended him being a bareback rider, and I guess it kind of pushed him more towards to seek out the military and that end of it more so.
Chris Kyle's choice to become a Navy SEAL reflected the character of a man whose life was dedicated to excellence.
The reason that he wanted to become a SEAL instead of something else was he heard from the Navy recruiter, of course, that SEALs were the most elite, the best.
They were these myths, you know, the men with green faces, the guys that emerged from the water, emerged from the sky, and Chris was all about, you know, wanting to be the best, be the elite.
It wasn't about money, it wasn't about ego, it was about, if I enjoy this and I want to do it, then I want to be the best. Even when he was a cowboy, it wasn't about money, it wasn't about notoriety. If he was training horses, he wanted to be the best at it. Same thing being a father, being a husband, you know, he was dedicated to doing it the best he could do.
But before he could become a SEAL, Chris had to endure the toughest military training in the world, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, known as BUDS in Coronado, California.
Chris would always talk to me about how hard BUDS was. You know, his words were it was a 7-day-a-week kick in the nuts. And there was days that he wanted to ring that bell. That bell was calling his name all the time.
Part of what got him through BUDS was he remembered the people that said, "You'll never make it." And he didn't want to be on a ship. You know, and that was, if you didn't make it through BUDS, you were in the Navy, you were going to be on a ship. And for him, he didn't like the sea, he didn't like the ocean that much.
He wasn't going to quit. He wouldn't quit anything, no matter what it was.
Despite suffering a fractured foot and a ruptured eardrum, Chris endured, graduating from BUDS in March 2001.
I was at his graduation from BUDS. He was on cloud nine to know that he accomplished something that very few do. One of my memories about his graduation at BUDS was he actually asked me to fix his ribbons, you know, and I joke with him all the time. You know, the Marines were always about, you know, looking good in uniform, being proper and everything, and then here's this guy fixing to graduate from BUDS and just looked terrible in his uniform. So I had to fix his ribbons. You know, we had a good laugh about that. You know, the family was there. You know, I wouldn't have missed it for anything. That was an honor for me to see him and all the other guys graduate that day.
If graduating BUDS was a landmark in Chris's life, what happened a month later was even bigger. At a downtown San Diego bar called Maloney's, he met a young brunette. For Chris, it was love at first sight. For the brunette, not so much.
I not only had reservations about dating somebody in the military, but I was adamant that I would not marry somebody who was a Navy SEAL, and in fact told that to Chris the night I met him. And when he was about to walk away, I sort of panicked because he already had me hooked. And I said, no, I said I wouldn't marry one. I didn't say I wouldn't date one.
Taya Studebaker's preconceptions about Navy SEALs didn't match the man she saw in front of her.
He was so idealistic and undeniably authentic. This was not the hot, young guy that I'd have fun with. This was a really deep, neat person who was intuitive and sensitive.
The pace of Chris and Taya's courtship was quickened by an unexpected event that would change the course of their lives as well as American history. Knowing Chris would soon be called to war, Taya proposed.
It was not too long after 9/11, we were on the phone and I said, I have a crazy idea. I think we should get married. And he said, I don't want to live a day in my life without you. That was it. It was that simple. We got married the day before St. Patrick's Day on a boat in the middle of the afternoon and had a 2-day honeymoon, and he was back to work. My favorite photo from our wedding is one where we're just nose to nose, and the flag happened to be flying in the background. To me, I look back at that sometimes, and it's bittersweet. It encompasses everything. It encompasses the fun and the light in our eyes, obviously in love, and then it's got the flag, which ended up being such a pivotal thing in our life.
With his training complete, Chris Kyle deployed to Iraq on the first day of the invasion, March 20th, 2003.
I met Chris when I checked into SEAL Team 3. I was his Master Chief and his mentor. Basically, my job was to make sure that he was took care of. He was pretty new, just coming out of buds, and he was just starting to get his feet on the ground.
When I first met him, he was just another guy in the SEAL team. And he got the same treatment as any other new guy in the SEAL teams, and he had to prove himself.
It quickly became evident that snipers would be of particular value in the conflict.
The initial push to Baghdad was pretty much, it wasn't that big a deal. It happened fast, and then it was like, okay, what do we do now? Then the enemy started getting organized and blowing everything up. The IEDs were coming on, and there was a pretty significant mission to go out and find these bad guys, and that mission definitely included snipers.
Chris's first assignment as a sniper would put his commitment to the test.
As tough as Chris was, he said he wouldn't know if he'd be able to take the first shot until he was there on the gun, and that nobody does.
I mean, some guys will go through sniper school, and they're the best shots you've ever seen. I mean, just naturals, all right? And then you get over there, and the first time you get shot at, they crawl into a hole. Man, it's just different that first time that bullet whizzes past your head.
He had some struggles the first time he had to pull the trigger. He talked to me a little bit about it. He talked to Dad quite a bit about it. It's not easy to look down that tube and see a person up close and personal and have that face ingrained in your mind.
His first shot, he had to think if he could take on the price of taking out a child in order to save a group of Marines. And he made that decision once, and then he knew that about himself, and so he took it on as many times as he had to.
He struggled with that, but he knows that he's pulled the trigger for the right reasons every time.
Though he had just arrived in the theater of war, Chris distinguished himself as a sniper almost immediately.
In his first deployment, he already started demonstrating qualities that his leadership was going, there's something special about this guy.
Chris Kyle was extremely effective with a gun. I believed in him as a sniper. I mean, we all did. We saw it in '04.
Then on second deployment, he really started cutting his teeth and making a name for himself.
Then we did the '06 deployment, and once again, we ended up in another major offensive in Ramadi. So once again, we were thrust into a major battle with the Marines, and Chris went to work again.
And his third deployment, he was nicknamed the Legend by the boys and the Devil of Ramadi by the bad guys.
And it was, you know, it was throughout the theater. It wasn't just us. It wasn't just the Marines. It was everybody. You know, there's this guy out there in Anbar province, you know, and he's just doing God's work.
But Chris never embraced his mythic status, preferring to focus on the job at hand.
He didn't think of himself as the legend. He hated that name. He hated people putting him up on a pedestal. He always says that he's not the best sniper out there. He was just given more opportunities.
Chris was the most prolific sniper in American military history. But if you ask Chris Chris would always say, A, I'm really not that great a shot, and B, I was just lucky. Now, there's actually a bit of truth to both of those things. Chris happened to be in a war where snipers were used in a way that they hadn't been used before, really. Snipers in the Iraq War were being used to cut down on collateral casualties. We did not want to kill civilians. Now, if you look at World War II, when the Allies went to Normandy and then went across France, when we came upon German troops, often that meant blowing up the building that they were in, whether there were civilians there or not. We've decided that that's not the way that we want to fight war anymore. So rather than leveling a village or leveling a street, we're trying just to selectively kill the people who are trying to kill American troops.
In this new generation of urban warfare, a sniper with Chris Kyle's ability could affect the outcome of an entire campaign.
His impact on the battlefield, I don't think they're ever gonna accurately tell that story. He did it better than anybody else.
He was so effective that they wouldn't come out in the streets. They knew when they got up and started moving around, he was gonna kill you. Well, somebody was gonna die.
He had kind of the classic sniper skills. And the classic sniper skills aren't necessarily that you are the most tippity-top precise gunner in the world. What you have to be is patient. And Chris could be extremely patient.
You can teach anybody to shoot straight. You can't teach patience, man.
He could lay on that gun for hours and hours and hours, where most guys get scope eye after 10 or 15 minutes. That guy laid on roofs that were so hot that the tar would melt into his uniform.
You'd have to tell him to get off glass. And he'd stay there on it. I mean, just days to get that shot.
Like a star athlete who still shows up first at the gym and is last to leave, Chris Kyle continued to hone his skills at every opportunity.
I think what made Chris so successful behind the gun was everything that led up to laying down behind the gun to actually take the shot. What people don't see is Chris Kyle in 2006 on the range, working his gun, dialing it in, taking a shot, figuring out what's wrong, cleaning it, leaving it dirty, whatever it was. And he did that with all aspects of his arsenal.
He wasn't one to just sit back and wait till game day and miss the practices. As long as he was awake, he was always doing something to make himself better.
Chris also showed uncanny powers of observation and a rare talent for strategic thinking.
After seeing the three-dimensional city, patrolling through the city, he could look at the map and say, bad guys are here, we need to be here, the Army's gonna be here, the Marines are gonna be here. And he had the ability to find those long axes and the correct angles to make the shot into bad guy land every time.
The most effective snipers, man, like Chris, are the guys who literally can drop you at 1,000 yards. The calculations, wind drift, I mean, you're talking about the spin of the earth comes into play on those long shots. You're running all the numbers in your head, and then you're dealing with the environmentals, and then you're dealing with this joker, and then you're dealing with the overall fact that you're about to kill somebody. He could have fired through 3 buildings to get that shot. Chris was a master at that.
But for all his mastery, Chris Kyle's warrior spirit was anchored in his unshakable commitment to his fellow soldiers, the men on the ground under his protection.
He felt a tremendous responsibility that people would die if he wasn't doing his job well, and because he was born a protector.
Chris just felt like that was his job, and the really brave guys were the ones that are on the street kicking the doors in.
He's saving our lives, man. That's his job. That's what he does, and he does it well. And in order to protect us, he has to kill somebody else, the enemy, the combatants.
As one deployment led to another, and the family of 2 became 3, and then 4, the toll of Chris's devotion to duty began to rise.
In the beginning, when they had no children, Chris could leave Taya for long periods of time. But once they had children, the deployments that Chris was going on were putting a lot more strain on Taya and on the kids, and then it was starting to have an effect on the children. At the same time, also, I think Taya was seeing that war was having an effect on Chris.
With his next deployment imminent, Chris began videotaping his bedtime rituals with his young son.
We'll read 2 more and then you can go to bed. This is so later. When I'm gone, you can look at the tape. On September 3rd, 2004, the news spread far and wide. Did you hear? The creature said, a baby boy arrived.
There were some moments where he would look at our children and feel that he hoped they never lost that innocence that they had, because he knew he had. And as childlike and playful and youthful as he could be, he knew that there was a part of him that he would not be able to get back.
Give me a hug.
On his 4th deployment, Chris was struck by enemy fire in the back and the head. Though his body armor protected him from serious injury, the man who returned home to Texas was battered and shaken.
I saw the destruction and I said, you've got to take a break. And as much as it was for me and the kids, I believe that it was for him as well, because the human body can only take that amount of intensity and trauma for so long.
Taya sat down with him and said, listen, I still love you. We have the same values. I'm always going to be your wife. I'm always going to raise your children. But if you re-enlist again, I have to go to an environment where I have more support, where the kids are going to have a strong male figure. And what she was saying, in a long, long discussion, was that she was going to move back close to her parents.
Faced with this difficult choice, Chris hung up his sealed trident and retired from the Navy.
For Chris to leave the teams, I think was probably the hardest thing he ever did in his life.
It was a very difficult decision for him. And it was one that, even though he made, and even though at the time he said that he was comfortable with it, he really wasn't comfortable with it. And there was still a long period of, months of readjustment.
I thought when Chris got out of the military that we were gonna have this amazing family life, just like we had when he had breaks from the military, and we laughed and the world was good. But what I didn't realize is when guys get out of the military, the civilian world is so different in so many ways that they do go through a process of, I don't know if it's grief or if it's mourning or if it's just change, but it is sort of traumatic.
Like so many returning veterans, Chris Kyle found himself lost without the sense of purpose he'd felt in the military.
For a while, he wasn't the same person because he felt like he had let his team down. He had let his brothers down.
He was probably drinking too much, and he just wasn't happy.
When he got back, he was depressed and trying to figure out his way. He told me, he said, I woke up and I realized I got to pull my bootstraps up, and I got to get my discipline about me, and I got to press on with life.
For Chris, pressing on with life meant finding a way to serve again, this time on the home front.
He started helping other veterans who had come home from the war with severe injuries.
Whether he was overseas or at home, he wanted to do everything he could to protect the guys, and I think when he got out, he saw that need, that he still had service to do.
Chris started informally helping some people that were taking some veterans on a hunting retreat. And it kind of became a regular thing with him. It was a way for him to continue serving the military, continue serving our country, but it was also kind of the protector in him.
He started realizing that he could serve other veterans, regardless of where they served, regardless of how they served or when they served. If he could reach a hand out to those that are struggling, that was how he got back and figured out that, hey, servantship and serving others was the way to get back to normalcy. I saw him come from that guy that was struggling with what is my path to realizing that this mission was as equally as vital as any mission he'd ever been on.
Having faced his demons and come out on the other side, Chris Kyle entered what would be the last year of his life a changed man.
He'd just gotten back to the man inside of the warrior. Our love was seasoned by all the trauma and all the crap that we went through. Knowing each other through death, through war, through love, through childbirth, new friends, old friends, losing friends, and we still came out totally in love.
And he was really getting to a place where he was a lot calmer, and you know, they had their family back. He was, you know, whole again.
In the year leading up to his death, it was as perfect gets. Everything that we wanted to be to each other, we were. We had the family time. I had that romantic Chris back. And there weren't many days that we didn't look at each other after tucking the kids in bed that, you know, we'd just say, we're so blessed.
On February 2nd, 2013, Chris was spending his Saturday, as he often did, trying to help another veteran adjust to civilian life. On a shooting range about an hour from home, that veteran took Chris's life along with that of his friend Chad Littlefield.
I think about so many different things related to Chris's death, and one of them, you know, I make no secret about my faith, and I believe that God does bring beauty through ashes, and I believe that the person who killed Chris and his friend Chad has the same promise the rest of us do, that we have free will. He just chose to do evil, but that God will turn something beautiful out of it.
Chris Kyle's death touched the nation in a way few could have imagined.
One of the remarkable things that happened after Chris died was just this outpouring of emotion, and just all these people who expressed so much feeling for Chris and for Taya. Yeah, I think in that way, Chris's impact is, it's kind of like a ripple effect. It just kind of keeps, you know, going out further and further.
One of the things we do when we lose someone is we find ways to keep them alive. The way you keep them alive is you incorporate what they were about into how you live and the way you use your days. Chris took every day that he was given seriously, and he wanted to matter. And in our own way, that's not leaving someone behind. That's why every day that I have that I shouldn't, my service to my friends' widows and kids is my way of not leaving them behind.
Through his book and the film American Sniper, Chris Kyle's legacy includes illuminating for millions an aspect of military life they might have never known.
One of the kind of lasting things that Chris has brought has been a knowledge of not just of what a warrior goes through on the battlefield, but what the families go through.
And we had couples from the Vietnam era and probably couples in the future who will look back and see that there's a timeless aspect to a warrior and the people who love them. And while I had teammates of Chris's tell me, Taya, I've had that exact conversation with my wife, but I never understood it until I watched the movie. And dialogue started opening up and healing started happening. To me, I think that's a perfect tribute to Chris, because his life and even his death was about serving other people.
The horrible tragedy of losing Chris has turned out to good because it's impacted so many people, you know, to inspire young people to be patriotic, to inspire older people that there's hope in the next generation that's behind them. He has done all that, and he's done that, unfortunately, in death.
Of all the stories and the things that I've heard, I feel like God did something really amazing with Chris's life and death. And because I have my faith, I also believe that I'll see him again someday. This is just my story. This is just my children's story. And I'm grateful that it's helped so many people, and I'm grateful that I do see the beauty. I see it through other people all the time. And I feel like Chris set up a really good example of how to live and serve, and all I have to do is live up to it.